What famous person has done something incredibly heinous, but has often been overlooked? Most people remember Rick James for his catchy funky music, his erratic drug issues, or the hilarious Chappelle's Show Charlie Murphy True Hollywood Stories skit. What people don't bring up as commonly. In 1991, James and his girlfriend Tanya Hijazi were accused of holding 24-year-old Frances Alley hostage for up to 6 days, tying her up, forcing her to perform sexual acts, and burning her legs and abdomen with the hot end of a crack cocaine pipe during a week-long cocaine binge. He faced life in prison for kidnapping, assault, and torture, but only received a 5-year sentence and ultimately served 2 years total. I feel like that was a pretty heinous series of acts that have been often overlooked over the past 30 years. Steven Seagal is a serial rapist and a fraud. I recommend the Behind the Bastards podcast episode about him. When I was training in Aikido in the 90s, the head of our style was Shion Fumio Toyota. He would come to do seminars like twice a year, and we all would go out to eat and he would tell us stories. Well, Shion was the person that Seagal got his first dan from. Shion told us when he was in Chicago to film his first movie, he took Shion out for dinner. We were told Seagal was so full of himself that Shion considered him an asshole. It takes a special kind of person to make an ass of yourself in front of your sensei. Karl Malone, ex-NBA player, impregnated a 13-year-old girl while he was 20 in college. Did not have a relationship with the kid. I lived in Ruston, Louisiana for a time, the same town he lives in, and a lot of people in town have stories about how much of a miserable asshole he is. Guess he could never get over not being able to beat MJ. His son Demetrius later grew up to play in the NFL Wiki article. It's worse. She gave birth at 13, which means in all likelihood she was 12 when he had sex with raped her. Edit, raped. Chris Benoit is more known for the circumstances of his death. Long story short, he's a wrestler, received too much chair shots to the head in his career, developed the brain of an 80-plus-year-old man at barely 40, had a breakdown and killed his wife, his son, and then himself. Once they learned this, WWE tried to basically bury him and act like he never existed, despite the fact that he was an enormous main eventer back then. Everyone is aware of this, and it's often debated whether Benoit is a victim or not. But then you have Jimmy Snuka over there who killed his girlfriend in cold blood for seemingly no reasons, and this motherfucker is in the Hall of Fame and no one seems to care. Benoit's legacy is so complicated as a lifelong wrestling fan. When I was a kid, Benoit was just so goddamn cool. He was amazing to watch. I think about the regard he would be held in if not for his what both happened to him, and what he did to his family. But there is more to add to what you said. WWE also unpersoned his son David. After the events of 2007, the only people from WWE that stayed in contact with him were Chris Jericho and Chavo Guerrero Jr. Everyone else just stayed quiet. If you have not watched Vice's Dark Side of the Ring, it is the single best wrestling documentary ever created. The whole show is worth the watch, but the two-part on Chris Benoit is particularly important. It is heartbreaking, but it ends with a much-needed ray of absolute love, happiness, and kindness. Coco Chanel was a big supporter of the Nazi Party. Coco Chanel was a member, not just a supporter, and went into hiding following the war before re-emerging later to rebuild her empire. She also fired her entire staff when they demanded worker rights. Just everyone that's with the Church of Scientology, an organization known for their shitty and psychotic practices. From Tom Cruise to John Travolta. They're all ignored because they're A-list actors even though they're involved in a goddamn cult. Where's Shelley, David? Oh. Yeah, Elizabeth Moss is a major one, as well. So many people seem shocked to find out that she's a Scientologist. Boy George, Man handcuffed an escort to a wall and beat them with a metal chain. This is what I was going to come in and add. It goes beyond that, too. He had the guy chained to the wall and was about to sexually torture him with objects, but the guy managed to break free and escape. This wasn't rough play, it was attempted straight up Gacy shit. He was just incompetent at it and got a slap on the wrist. The fella used to work on my local pub, he was a nice guy. Horrible thing to happen to him. I remember Marcia Cross being interviewed on a late night show around the time Desperate Housewives was hot shit, Leno, I think, and she was just giddily talking about how terrible of a driver she was. I think I remember her saying something along the lines of cars just being like bumper cars and, if you hit something, you just back up and move on with your day. I'm like, bitch. That's called a hit and run and it's fucking illegal. P.T. Barnum is usually the first mentioned on this kind of thread, but I don't see him yet. The Greatest Showman was an awesome movie, but it portrayed Barnum in a very positive light. His very first exhibit was a black woman who he bought from an acquaintance of his. Slavery was banned at that time, but he used a loophole to evade that. He ended up holding a live autopsy of the black woman once she died and cut up her body in front of a crowd. He confessed to owning quite a few slaves in his life and whipping them. They worked very long shifts without sufficient breaks. His treatment of animals wasn't very nice either. He had this training method for elephants where he'd shove hot pokers up their trunks. His handlers carried sharp hooks which they used to hurt the elephants. He kept 2 beluga whales in the basement of his museum for a couple days, though this was kept short by them dying. Oh, and the guy with dwarfism in the movie. He was 4 years old when Barnum hired him. Barnum had him drinking wine and smoking for the audience. And he dehumanized his performers a lot. He claimed that people with deformities were part animal or not human at all. Signs would say what is that thing? Etc. He was definitely not Hugh Jackman. The Greatest Showman is the movie P.T. Barnum would have made about P.T. Barnum. Steven Tyler got custody of his 14-year-old girlfriend so she could go on tour with Aerosmith and be together. Her parents consented. Boy George. He captured and tortured someone. Chained him in his room. I believe he only served a short sentence. Salman Khan, the Indian actor, not the Khan Academy gentleman, killed 1 person and injured 4 other homeless people sleeping on the streets after his car crashed into them. He has also been accused for poaching black bucks, chinkara etc. In addition to this, he has also harassed a well-known actress after they broke up. Every time a lower court convicts him, he appeals to a higher court granting him a bail. Fuck him. Fuck that bastard. Edit, to avoid misunderstanding with a gentleman of the same name. Really hope you're talking about the Bollywood actor and not the Khan Academy guy because I fucking love that guy. Marcos Alonso from Chelsea killed a 19-year-old while drunk driving and got off with a 61,000 euros fine. His salary per week is 110,000 euros. In the early 90s, Tom and Roseanne, Bar, Arnold financed a large-scale meth operation in southeast Iowa that ran through Tom's brother-in-law's horse breeding operation. This one doesn't get a lot of publicity, but to the locals, it's just a known fact. Edit, didn't expect this to blow up. Some background information. At the height of their celebrity, Tom and Roseanne spent nearly every weekend in Wapello County, Iowa with his brother-in-law Floyd, who was sentenced to 50+ years in federal prison for meth. Tom and Roseanne, at the time of the bust, were building a mansion in Eldon, Iowa. Eldon fucking Iowa. Anyone from that area knows the only thing in Eldon is and was meth. My personal sources on this are known associates that did various amounts of time from the bust at Floyd's ranch, his neighbors, and a litany of people who partied with the group in the early 90s. It's assumed by most of those that Tom and Roseanne are the unnamed informants in Floyd's deposition. They stopped building the mansion and just left it abandoned at that time. Roseanne has never been back. Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin's guitarist, had a 14-year-old girlfriend and he knew exactly what he was doing. Chuck Berry was jailed for 3 years for shagging a 14-year-old girl, and was caught videotaping women in the bathroom of one of his restaurants. Elvis was 24 when he started dating Priscilla, who was 14. After Lisa Marie was born, he lost interest in Priscilla, instead hooked up with another 14-year-old named Rika Smith. Jerry Lee Lewis's seventh marriage was to the ex-sister-in-law of his third wife, Myra, who was 13 years old, and the daughter of Lewis' cousin. Paul Gauguin took 3 native child brides, aged 13, 14, and 14 in Tahiti and infected all 3 of them, plus a whole bunch of other local women he was seeing on the side, with syphilis. The sculptor, Eric Gill, was into bestiality and fucking his own daughters. Edit. And his sisters. Edit. Let's not forget Rick Astley's shocking crime. Melissa Benoist's first husband almost blinded her. So she's been doing the Supergirl TV show for a while now, but a few years back news came out that she had hurt her eye. She said she had tripped or something, had hurt herself at home. Nope. Her first husband threw his phone at her in a fit of rage, hit her in the eye, and she almost lost her sight. Glad she left that psycho. John Travolta refused to give his son his prescribed epilepsy meds because Scientology doesn't believe in mental illnesses, and as a result the son died.